The electric clippers buzzed in the trembling hands of a homeless man as he knelt over the unconscious billionaire lying in a pool of his own blood on Fifth Avenue. Hundreds of people stood frozen, recording on their phones, but nobody moved to help. Nobody except Vincent Chun, a man who owned nothing but the clothes on his back and a pair of old hair clippers. As he shaved through the billionaire's perfectly styled hair, revealing the massive gash underneath, someone screamed, "He's mutilating him." Someone stopped this maniac. But what Vincent was actually doing would save this man's life in the next 90 seconds. And what happened after that would shock the entire world and prove that sometimes the person society throws away is the only one brave enough to act when it matters most. But before I tell you how this impossible moment unfolded, I need to warn you that this story will challenge everything you believe about success, failure, and the invisible line between hero and villain. It will make you question who the real criminals are in our society. And it might just change how you see that homeless person you pass every single day. If you love powerful stories with life-changing lessons, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why the man with nothing saved the man with everything, and why the billionaire's response will restore your faith in humanity or destroy it completely. You'll learn why a pair of hair clippers became the most valuable medical instrument on Fifth Avenue that day. But let me take you back to where it all began, to the morning when Vincent Chun woke up believing it would be just another day of survival. This is the story of Vincent Chun, a 47-year-old homeless man who had spent the last 8 years living on the streets of New York City, believing that his life no longer had purpose or value. Vincent woke up every morning at 5:30 under the scaffolding outside an abandoned building on 42nd Street. He would fold his cardboard sleeping mat carefully, hide it behind a dumpster, and begin his daily routine of survival. He collected cans for recycling, 5 cents each, needing 200 cans to make $10. He waited in line at the soup kitchen on 9th Avenue for breakfast. He spent his afternoon sitting outside Penn Station with a cardboard sign that read, "Homeless veteran. Anything helps. God bless." Most people walked past without looking. Some dropped quarters. A few stopped to talk, treating him like a human being, and those were the moments that kept him going. But Vincent wasn't always homeless. 8 years ago, he'd been a paramedic. He'd worked for the New York Fire Department for 23 years, responding to thousands of emergency calls, saving countless lives. He'd been married to a woman named Sarah. They'd had 2 daughters, Emma and Lily. He'd owned a small house in Queens with a garden where he grew tomatoes. He'd had a life, a purpose, a future. But then everything fell apart in a way that destroyed him completely. Vincent had responded to a car accident on a rainy night. A family of 4 trapped in a minivan that had flipped on the highway. He'd made a split-second decision to stabilize the father first because his injuries looked most severe. But while he was working on the father, the 8-year-old daughter in the back seat stopped breathing. By the time Vincent got to her, it was too late. She died in his arms. The investigation cleared Vincent of any wrongdoing. The medical examiner said the girl's injuries were too severe, that nothing could have saved her. But the family sued anyway. The media picked up the story. Vincent's face was plastered across newspapers with headlines like "Paramedic's Fatal Mistake" and "Wrong Choice Costs Girl Her Life." The lawsuit was dismissed, but the damage was done. Vincent couldn't sleep. He saw that little girl's face every time he closed his eyes. He started drinking to numb the pain. His marriage fell apart. Sarah took the girls and moved across the country. He lost his job. He lost his house. He lost everything. And eventually, he ended up on the streets with nothing but guilt and a pair of hair clippers that he'd kept from his old life. Why hair clippers? Because before Vincent became a paramedic, he'd worked in his uncle's barbershop in Chinatown. He'd learned to cut hair when he was 12 years old. Even on the streets, Vincent would sometimes offer cut hair for other homeless people in exchange for food. Those clippers were the last connection to who he used to be before everything went wrong, before he became invisible. Vincent had no idea that in exactly 6 hours, those clippers would save a life in the most unexpected way. And that one moment would force him to confront everything he'd been running from for 8 years. Now, let me introduce you to Marcus Whitmore, The 61-year-old billionaire CEO who had spent his entire life believing that success was measured in dollars and power, and that failure was something that only happened to weak people. Marcus Whitmore was worth $2.3 billion, according to Forbes. He was the founder and CEO of Whitmore Technologies, a company that manufactured medical devices sold in hospitals worldwide. He lived in a penthouse on Park Avenue worth $45 million. He owned homes in the Hamptons, Aspen, and Monaco. He drove a different luxury car every day of the week. He wore suits that cost more than most people made in a month. To the world, Marcus Whitmore was the definition of success, the American dream incarnate. A self-made man who would build an empire from a small startup in his garage. Business magazines featured him constantly. He gave TED Talks about innovation and perseverance. Universities competed to have him speak at graduations. Young entrepreneurs studied his methods and tried to replicate his aggressive business tactics. But Marcus had a secret that he had behind his perfect smile and expensive suits. He was dying. 6 months ago, Marcus had been diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, a weakened blood vessel in his brain that could rupture at any moment. The doctors had recommended immediate surgery, but Marcus refused. He was in the middle of the biggest deal of his career, a merger worth $800 million. Surgery meant 6 weeks of recovery. 6 weeks meant losing the deal. So Marcus gambled with his life. He took blood thinners. He ignored the headaches. He pushed through the dizzy spells. He told himself he just needed 3 more months to close the deal, and then he'd have the surgery. Marcus dealt with the fear of death by working harder, by accumulating more, by proving his worth through his achievements. When his assistant suggested he slow down, Marcus fired her on the spot. When his doctor insisted on surgery, Marcus found a new doctor who would prescribe whatever he wanted. When his ex-wife called to beg him to take care of himself for the sake of their son, Marcus hung up on her. "I built this empire through discipline," Marcus would tell himself. "Weakness is death in business. Fear is failure. I don't have time to be sick. I don't have time to be vulnerable. I have to keep moving forward." He believed his wealth could protect him from anything. He believed his success made him invincible. He believed that he was different from ordinary people, that normal rules didn't apply to him, and he was about to learn the most brutal lesson of his life. Marcus barely noticed homeless people. To him, they were scenery, background noise, evidence of personal failure. He'd never given money to a panhandler. He'd actively lobbied against homeless shelters being built near his properties. He'd written op-eds arguing that homelessness was a choice. "When people are hungry enough, they'll find work," he'd said in an interview. "Homelessness is a lifestyle choice, not a medical condition. These people need accountability, not handouts." But in less than 3 hours, Marcus Whitmore would collapse on Fifth Avenue, his brain aneurysm rupturing. And the only person who would save his life would be the very type of person he'd spent his entire life looking down on. And the method of saving him would be so shocking that witnesses would try to stop it. It was a Tuesday morning. Marcus would remember fragments of that day for the rest of his life, but most of it would be lost to the darkness that was coming. Marcus was walking to a meeting at the Plaza Hotel. He refused his driver because the traffic was bad and he needed the exercise. The morning was clear and cold. Fifth Avenue was crowded with tourists and business people and street vendors. Marcus was on his phone, closing a deal when the first wave of pain hit. It felt like someone had driven a spike through the base of his skull. Marcus stumbled but caught himself. He ended the call. The pain intensified. His vision blurred at the edges. No, he thought. Not now. Not today. Not when I'm this close. Marcus took 3 more steps. The world tilted sideways. He reached for a lamppost, but his hand couldn't find it. People were staring at him now. "Sir, are you okay?" someone asked. Marcus tried to answer, but his words came out slurred. "I'm fine. Just need a minute." Then his brain aneurysm ruptured. The pain was beyond description. Marcus fell forward, his head hitting the concrete with a sickening crack. Blood began pooling beneath him from the impact wound on his scalp and from his ears where the pressure was causing hemorrhaging. People screamed. A crowd formed instantly. Everyone pulled out their phones. Some were calling for help. Most were recording. In the age of viral videos, tragedy had become content. Someone called 911. A woman shouted, Is he breathing? A man asked. Oh my God, there's so much blood, a teenager said, her phone pointed at Marcus's face. But nobody moved closer. Nobody knelt down to help. Nobody touched him. They stood in a circle, watching, recording, narrating, but not acting. Vincent was sitting 50 feet away outside a Starbucks with his cardboard sign. When he heard the commotion, he stood up slowly, his joints aching from sleeping on concrete. He pushed through the crowd of onlookers. When he saw the man lying unconscious in a pool of blood, something inside Vincent that had been dormant for 8 years suddenly activated. His paramedic training, buried under years of trauma and alcohol, came roaring back. Vincent pushed to the front of the crowd and knelt beside Marcus. Did anyone call 911? Vincent demanded. Yes, someone's calling, a woman answered. How long ago? Vincent asked, checking Marcus's pulse. It was weak and irregular. Maybe 2 minutes? When Vincent heard sirens in the distance, he knew it wasn't enough time. Has anyone checked if he's breathing? Is anyone doing first aid? Vincent looked around at the dozens of people standing there. Nobody answered. They just stared. Some looked guilty. Most looked uncomfortable that a homeless man was talking to them. Vincent looked at Marcus's head. The scalp was bleeding heavily from the impact, but that wasn't a critical injury. Vincent could see something worse. Marcus's skull appeared slightly misshapen. The aneurysm rupture was causing intracranial pressure. Blood was building up inside his skull with nowhere to go. Without immediate pressure relief, Marcus would die before the ambulance arrived. Vincent had seen this before. In his years as a paramedic, he'd responded to 3 similar cases. The protocol was clear, but it required a medical procedure that Vincent had no equipment to perform. Except he did have one tool, his hair clippers. What Vincent was about to do was technically illegal. It would look horrifying to everyone watching. People would try to stop him, but it was the only chance Marcus had. Vincent pulled out his old hair clippers from his backpack. Someone in the crowd gasped. What is he doing? Oh my God, he's going to rob him. Call the police. He's attacking him. Get away from that man. People started shouting. Vincent ignored them. He turned on the clippers and began shaving Marcus's hair, working quickly but carefully. People in the crowd screamed. Someone tried to grab Vincent's arm. Stop. You're mutilating him. What is wrong with you? A man in a business suit grabbed Vincent's shoulder. I'm a lawyer, and what you're doing is assault. I'm documenting this. But Vincent didn't stop. He shaved away Marcus's expensive haircut, revealing the full extent of the head wound. The gash was 4 inches long and deep. But more importantly, Vincent could see the subtle swelling indicating the pressure building inside. He needed to relieve that pressure immediately. Vincent pulled out the small first aid kit he always carried, a remnant from his paramedic days. He had alcohol wipes, gauze, and a safety pin. He sterilized the pin with alcohol. Then, using a technique he learned 20 years ago, Vincent made a small release incision at a specific point on Marcus's scalp where the swelling was worst. Blood and fluid began draining immediately, releasing the pressure. Marcus gasped, his first real breath in 2 minutes. The crowd went silent. Someone whispered, "What did he just do?" Vincent elevated Marcus's head, applied pressure to the bleeding, and monitored his pulse. It was getting stronger. "Come on," Vincent whispered. "Stay with me. You're not dying today." The ambulance arrived 4 minutes later. Paramedics rushed forward with equipment and a stretcher. One of them, a young woman, looked at Vincent with recognition. "You're Vincent Chun. You used to work at Station 14. Vincent nodded. "He has an intracranial bleed, probable aneurysm rupture. I relieved the pressure and stabilized his airway." "You saved his life," the paramedic said quietly. "If you hadn't done that, he'd be dead." As they loaded Marcus into the ambulance, a police officer approached Vincent. "Several people here say you assaulted this man. I'm going to need you to come with me." Vincent didn't resist. He'd saved a life. If the price was arrest, so be it. What Vincent didn't know was that 3 people in that crowd had recorded the entire incident. And by that evening, the video would go viral with a caption that would change everything. "Homeless hero saves billionaire's life with hair clippers while crowd watches. And Marcus Whitmore, when he finally woke up 3 days later, would make a choice that would either prove humanity's capacity for gratitude or expose its limitless cruelty. For the first 12 hours after Marcus's surgery, nobody knew if he would survive. The neurosurgeon who operated on him, Dr. Patricia Morrison, told the media that Marcus had been minutes from death when he arrived. The pressure release performed by the homeless man gave us the time we needed, Dr. Morrison said in a press conference. Without that intervention, Mr. Whitmore would have died before reaching the hospital. It was an unorthodox procedure, but it was the correct one. Whoever that man is, he's a hero. But Vincent didn't hear any of this. He was sitting in a holding cell being questioned by police. The district attorney was trying to decide whether to charge him with practicing medicine without a license, assault, or to drop the charges entirely. Meanwhile, the video had exploded across social media. 20 million views in 24 hours. 50 million in 48 hours. 130 million by the time Marcus woke up. The world was divided. Half the comments praised Vincent as a hero who had saved a life, while everyone else just watched. The other half criticized him for performing a dangerous procedure without permission, arguing that he could have killed Marcus. News outlets debated the ethics. Legal experts argued about Good Samaritan laws. Medical professionals dissected Vincent's technique. And everyone wanted to know who this homeless man was and what would happen to him. 3 days after the incident, Marcus opened his eyes in his hospital room. His head was wrapped in bandages. Tubes ran from his arms. Machines beeped softly, and his ex-wife Jennifer was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. She'd flown in from California the moment she'd heard. "Marcus?" Jennifer's voice broke. "Can you hear me?" "Where am I?" Marcus whispered. "You're at Mount Sinai. You collapsed on Fifth Avenue. You had emergency brain surgery. You've been unconscious for 3 days." Marcus tried to remember. He recalled walking, pain, falling, then nothing. "How am I alive?" "A homeless man saved you," Jennifer said, tears streaming down her face. "He did some kind of emergency procedure with hair clippers. The doctor said you would have died without it. He's all over the news." Vincent Chun, former paramedic. "Show me," Marcus said. Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed Marcus the video. He watched in silence as a homeless man with dirty clothes and weathered hands carefully shaved his head and performed the pressure release that saved his life. He watched the crowd trying to stop Vincent. He watched Vincent ignore them all, focused completely on keeping Marcus alive. "Where is he now?" Marcus asked quietly. "In jail," Jennifer said. "They arrested him. The DA is trying to decide whether to press charges. Some people are calling him a hero. Others are saying he assaulted you. What do you want to do, Marcus?" This was Marcus's moment of choice. He could press charges and protect himself legally. He could stay silent and let the justice system handle it. Or he could do something that would require him to confront everything he believed about success, failure, and human worth. Marcus made his decision. "Give me a phone. I need to call my lawyers. I need to call the mayor. I need to call every news outlet in this city. And I need to meet Vincent Chin immediately." Jennifer stared at her ex-husband. "What are you going to do?" "The right thing," Marcus said. "For the first time in my life, I'm going to do the right thing." 24 hours later, all charges against Vincent were dropped. Marcus had used every connection he had to make it happen. But Marcus didn't stop there. He did something that would shock everyone who knew him and restore faith in humanity. For millions watching around the world, Marcus scheduled a press conference for the day he was released from the hospital. Every major news outlet attended. And standing beside Marcus at the podium was Vincent Chun, freshly showered, wearing new clothes that Marcus had provided, looking overwhelmed and terrified. Marcus stepped to the microphone, his head still bandaged. "My name is Marcus Whitmore, and I'm alive today because of the man standing next to me. Vincent Chin saved my life. But before I tell you what I'm going to do for him, I need to tell you what I've learned." Marcus paused, his voice breaking. "I spent my entire life believing that success was measured in dollars, that homeless people were failures who deserved their situation. I lobbied against shelters. I refused to give to panhandlers. I wrote op-eds saying homelessness was a choice. I was wrong. Completely, utterly, shamefully wrong. Vincent Chun is not a failure. He's a hero. He was a paramedic for 23 years. He saved countless lives. He lost everything because of trauma, because of a system that failed him, because of people like me who refused to help. And when I was dying on Fifth Avenue, when hundreds of people with phones and money and education just watched, the only person brave enough to act was the man society had thrown away. The press conference room was completely silent. Marcus continued, his voice stronger now. So here's what I'm doing. First, I'm personally funding construction of a medical clinic specifically for homeless individuals. Vincent will help design it. Second, I'm establishing a $10 million foundation to provide mental health services and job training for homeless veterans. Vincent will sit on the board. Third, I'm offering Vincent a position in my company as Director of Community Outreach, with full salary, benefits, and housing. And finally, Marcus turned to look directly at Vincent. I'm asking Vincent to forgive me for my ignorance, for my cruelty, for every homeless person I've ignored or insulted, for being the kind of man who needed to almost die to learn basic human decency. Tears ran down Marcus's face. You saved my life when you had every reason not to. You had no insurance, no legal protection, nothing to gain. You did it because it was right. You're a better man than I've ever been. The press conference room erupted in applause. Reporters were crying. Cameras flashed. And Vincent Chun, the homeless man who believed his life no longer had value, stood there realizing that his darkest moment 8 years ago hadn't defined him, that he was still the person who ran toward emergencies instead of away from them, that he was still a hero. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened in the months that followed would prove that this wasn't just a publicity stunt or a momentary gesture. Marcus Whitmore was about to change not just Vincent's life, but the lives of thousands of people, proving that transformation is possible and that sometimes it takes almost dying to learn how to truly live. 6 months after the press conference, the world looked very different for both men. Vincent moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn that Marcus helped him secure. It was the first time in 8 years that Vincent had slept in a real bed, taken a shower in his own bathroom, cooked a meal in his own kitchen. Vincent started working for Whitmore Technologies as Director of Community Outreach. His job was to build bridges between the company and the homeless community, to design programs that actually worked, to bring the perspective of someone who had lived through it. Vincent also started therapy for his PTSD from the little girl's death 8 years ago. It was painful. Some sessions left him sobbing, but slowly he began to forgive himself. The therapist helped him understand that he'd made the best decision he could with the information he had, that the girl's death wasn't his fault. That trauma doesn't mean you're broken. Vincent reconnected with his ex-wife, Sarah. They met for coffee. She cried when she saw him clean and healthy. The girls, now teenagers, were nervous but willing to rebuild a relationship with their father. It would take time. Trust had to be earned back. But Vincent was willing to do the work. Marcus underwent a complete transformation that went far beyond the press conference. The medical clinic for homeless individuals opened 4 months after Marcus left the hospital. It was state-of-the-art, offering free medical care, mental health services, addiction treatment, and job counseling. It served over 300 people in its first month, but Marcus didn't just write a check and walk away. He volunteered there every Tuesday, serving meals, talking to people, listening to their stories. He learned their names. He heard about their traumas, their losses, their struggles. He began to understand that homelessness wasn't a moral failure, but a systemic problem. Marcus also changed how he ran his company. He started a program to hire formerly homeless individuals for entry-level positions with full training. He increased wages for his lowest-paid employees. He added mental health coverage to all employee insurance plans. His board of directors was furious at first. "You're destroying shareholder value." They argued. "You're running a charity, not a business." Marcus's response silenced them. "I almost died because I prioritized money over my health. I was saved by a man I would have ignored a week earlier. If that doesn't change how I run this company, then I learned nothing." We can be profitable and humane. Watch me prove it. And he did. Employee retention improved. Productivity increased. The company's reputation soared. Customers wanted to do business with a company that treated people well. Within a year, Whitmore Technologies was more profitable than ever, proving that compassion and success weren't mutually exclusive. But the most powerful moment came 9 months after that day on Fifth Avenue. Vincent was invited to speak at a conference for emergency medical professionals. He stood at the podium looking out at 1,000 paramedics, EMTs, and firefighters. Many of them knew his story. Some had judged him harshly for what happened 8 years ago. Vincent spoke about trauma, about the weight that first responders carry, about the impossibility of saving everyone, about the danger of letting one moment define your entire life. And then he said something that brought the entire room to tears. 8 years ago, I made a decision that haunted me every day. A little girl died, and I thought it was my fault. I thought I was finished. I thought I had nothing left to offer the world. I became homeless. I gave up. But on Fifth Avenue 6 months ago, when I saw a man die and everyone else was just watching, my training came back. And I realized something. I'm still a paramedic. That doesn't go away. That's who I am. One tragedy doesn't erase 23 years of lives saved. And if you're sitting here carrying guilt about someone you couldn't save, I need you to hear this. You're still a hero. One loss doesn't define you. You're still the person who runs toward danger. You're still needed. Don't give up. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of first responders came up to Vincent to share their own stories of trauma, guilt, and survival. Vincent had become a voice for the invisible wounds that emergency workers carry. And in the audience that day was Marcus Whitmore. He sat in the back row, listening to the man who had saved his life, and realized that Vincent had saved him twice. Once on Fifth Avenue, with hair clippers, and once more by teaching him what real strength looked like. After the conference, Marcus and Vincent went to dinner. They become unlikely friends, two men from completely different worlds who had collided in a moment of crisis and emerged changed. Vincent, Marcus said over coffee, I need to ask you something. Why did you save me? You had every reason not to. I represent everything you'd lost. I'm the type of person who looked down on people like you. Why risk your freedom to save someone like me? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, when I saw you lying there, I didn't see a billionaire. I didn't see someone who would judge me or people like me. I saw a human being who was dying, and I was the only person there who could help. If I'd walked away because of who you were, or who I was, that little girl from 8 years ago would have died for nothing. I needed to prove to myself that I was still the person who saves people. Not because they deserve it, but because it's right. Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. You taught me more in 90 seconds than I learned in 61 years. That's not a lesson, Vincent said gently. That's just remembering what you knew as a child before the world taught you to forget. We're all connected. What I do to you, I do to myself. What you do to me, you do to yourself. We're not separate. We never were. So what's the lesson here? What can we learn from this impossible story of a homeless man who saved a billionaire with hair clippers? First, never judge someone by their circumstances. Vincent was homeless, but he was still a hero. He still had skills, compassion, and courage. The suit doesn't make the man. The address doesn't define the person. Every human being has value regardless of what they've lost or where they sleep at night. Second, when everyone else is watching, be the one who acts. There were hundreds of people on Fifth Avenue that day. Everyone had a phone. Many called for help. But only one person actually knelt down and did something. In a world of spectators, be a participant. In a culture of content creation, be a lifesaver. Third, it's never too late to change. Marcus spent 61 years being wrong about nearly everything that mattered. But he changed. Completely. Authentically. Not just with words, but with actions. Your past doesn't define your future. Every moment is a chance to choose differently. Fourth, the skills you think you've lost are still inside you. Vincent thought his paramedic days were over. But when the moment came, everything he'd learned came back. Your training doesn't disappear. Your gifts don't vanish. Even after years of trauma or failure, you're still capable of extraordinary things. And finally, compassion is the only thing that actually matters. At the end of your life, you won't be measured by your bank account or your job title. You'll be measured by how you treated people who couldn't do anything for you. Marcus learned this the hardest way possible, and it saved him. If this story touched your heart, I have a challenge for you. This week, see one homeless person. Really see them. Learn their name. Hear their story. Buy them a meal. Give them your time, not just your spare change. Because that person might be a veteran, a former paramedic, someone's father, a hero who fell on hard times, someone exactly like Vincent Chun. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that restore your faith in humanity. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, the person society has thrown away might be the only one brave enough to save you. Never forget that. Never. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone in need while everyone else just watched? Did you act or did you freeze? Or have you been the person who needed help that nobody would give? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space where we acknowledge our shared humanity. Next time on this channel, I'll tell you about the janitor who was mocked by wealthy executives every single day until one of them had a heart attack and discovered that the janitor was actually a retired cardiac surgeon who had lost everything. You won't believe what happened next. If you love this story, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. Hit that like button if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the people you see on the streets every day. And share with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes don't always wear capes, and sometimes they carry hair clippers and backpacks. Until next time, remember this truth. Your value isn't determined by what you own or where you live. It's determined by what you do when someone needs help and no one else is willing to act. Be the person who acts. Be the Vincent Chun in someone's story. Be the hero the world desperately needs. Because we're all one tragedy away from needing help. We're all one moment away from being the person lying on the ground while everyone watches. Treat every human being like they matter. Because they do. Every single one. No exceptions. Ever.